copy of each of these?
It's not going to be here. Mike, Delegate James is not going to be here, but he asked for copies of the handouts. We'll give it to him. Let's give him this. Might as well pick this up and we'll,
Okay.
What's up, Brian? Making out with the $5 babies.
Sharon, we can share with the audience if anybody wants to grab them. I think you know exactly how many would be needed or what. That's wonderful, thank you.
we'll get it.
It's all over the gas.
They're still on the floor, so we can get this.
We had a meeting at Fifth Street, so we walked Fifth Street.
Shoot a note, hey, the sun's still in.
There's no file. Well, it's first. Because Joe just come like up to me. No.
Oh, boy.
Zach, you want to sit over here while they're on the spot? I need you.
It's quite a contrast. Which I hadn't seen in the pictures.
Senate's still in session, so we'll probably get this in before we need to go to bills. I'm not thinking exactly a turn, it's still going.
You're going to thank Garrett Rush and him. I'm sorry, Garrett, the Delegate James is not going to be here, Mr. Chairman,
Okay.
but we have copies of the material for him.
Yes.
So
Do I need to get?
we're just missing Garrett. We're just missing two members. And you have no bills, so we can read for them.
No, no. Or you gonna get those copies from Delegate James?
Yes.
Okay. I'll be seeing him tomorrow, so. Okay. Looking at service.
I noticed Debbie pointed me to Lost and Found. This is the dot sheet that lists all of our leave and the various categories. It tells you how much you get, it tells you the type, the amount, how many leaves, and let's say we're talking parental leave, it's not on here, but if we were to add parental leave, it would be, the type would be called parental leave, and the amount is whatever you would put, you know, we had bills in here from 6 weeks to 12 weeks. Whatever you would decide is how many weeks, and it would be for both VSVP and non-VSVP. If you put in a requirement to add, to say you have to work here for a year before you're eligible, that would require some type of tenure, and that would be checked. And then how leave is counted, you get it credited, accrued, earned, awarded, or as needed. And for pregnancy, it would be as needed. It is not carried over, and it's not determined, and you can't have, not limited to one in a fiscal year. It does roll over, over a year. And if you passed a bill, we would check state authority, and we would have a policy to accompany it, so those two buckets would be checked. So I thought that as we go through the leave discussion, having this as a master list will help focus. The holidays, we start with holidays, that's not really a leave category, but I put it on here just so you know we have 12 days, plus others as generously given by the governor. All right, with that, let's see if we can't move to the state leave plan. We administer personnel policies for the employees of the Commonwealth of Virginia, and that's Department of Human Resource Management. And the leave year is January 10th through January 9th for many leave categories. Not all of them have the same amount. If you look at your little chart, you see what does and what doesn't. And then VRS has the responsibility for VSDP, and they're gonna be going over discussions with that, and they have contracted with a third-party administrator, the Reed Group, and I'm sure Trish will be going over that when she's up here. Sick leave programs for the state, there are two. One is traditional sick leave, which applies for leave accrual and carryover, and the other is the sickness and disability program, which provides a short-term and a long-term benefit, as well as 4 or 5 days for sick and family personal leave on an annual basis. To give you an idea of what's happened to the leave program, how many people are we talking about? The number in the traditional sick leave program is declining. Nobody else can join it, and so that number will diminish, and so it's about 11 or 12,000 folks, and all the others are VSDP, so that plan is growing.
Just for background for the sub, everybody used to be in that, and then when they had the VSDP, there was an open enrollment period. Where
We'll
you
go
had a
into
choice.
that,
So-
right. Trish will go into that in a second.
Okay.
Thank
Sure.
you, Mike.
He's a historian.
I think that's what she meant.
Yes, thank you, Michael. And if we don't cover it, you make sure we do, okay? Traditional sick leave. Traditional sick leave since January 1, 1999, and no one else can join. And as I said, it's a declining group, and the primary difference between the two of these is that there's no limit to the amount of sick leave that can be carried over, and we'll get into the details here. We have a policy that governs sick leave, and you can go online and see policy 4.55. Classified employees accrue 5 hours of sick leave at the end of each pay period. There is no limit on the amount of sick leave that employees can carry over from 1 year to the next. Sick leave may be used during periods of illness or disability or absences due to a doctor's appointment. If they come see you, that counts. Employees have access to 48 hours accrued sick leave to use for illness or death of an immediate family member. And 33% of the employee's available sick leave balance may be used to cover an absence for a FEMLA certified event, a family, yes, medical leave for an eligible family member, but you can only use a third, so there are limits on that. And now we'll move into Michael, the SDP.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, and thank you, Michael, for the wonderful preview. VSDP was enacted in 1999, and so what happened at that point was not only a change in the sick leave, but it dovetailed with how we handled disability retirement at the same time. So what we did was we restructured the sick leave program so that folks would have a smaller bucket of sick leave and family and personal leave that they'd get on an annual basis. And then if they had an illness or injury that required extended coverage, they would have short-term disability. If that disability goes longer than that, they'd migrate into long-term disability. And the goal of a managed disabilities plan is really to try to focus on rehabilitation and getting people back to work. Our traditional disability retirement was what's called under an own occupation standard. So if folks couldn't do their own occupation, then they could be retired if their disability was likely to be permanent. Under a managed disabilities program, the first 24 months, they are under the own occupation standard, and after that, then it's an any occupation standard. So it's a little bit different, and they kind of dovetail together, and they were put together as one comprehensive package. But so now our folks who are now state employees who come under VSDP do get smaller leave buckets for medical appointments and so forth. And we'll have some tables on those. So is that clear for everybody? Okay. Oh, and they did have existing employees had an opportunity to elect to go into VSDP. There was an election window. And then the second election window that we had said, if you don't affirmatively elect to not be in VSDP, you will be placed into it. So, and that was the last election we had in 2002. So, DHRM policy governs the VSDP leave amounts, and so they provide a limited amount of sick and personal leave that can't be carried over from year to year, as well as the supplemental income that is designated for those periods of leave. As I noted, it encourages return to work and rehabilitation. Employees may receive short-term disability benefit for 125 work days, which is roughly 6 months or so, and then after meeting a 7 calendar day waiting period. And during that 7 calendar day waiting period before the short-term disability kicks in, they can use their annual leave, their sick leave, their family and personal leave, or if they don't have any of that, leave without pay before they migrate into the short-term disability benefits. And then long-term disability benefits may be applicable for those after the expiration of that 6-month period. New hires and rehires are eligible for non-work related disability benefits after 1 year. So they don't get those short-term disability benefits until 1 year. However, they do still get that sick leave, that small bucket of sick leave, and the family and personal leave. And so the other thing to note is that eligible employees can use 33% of their sick leave balances for a FEMLA absence or for an immediate family member under FEMLA. So this chart tries to walk you through the current category, the leave for current employees. So for full-time and quasi-full-time employees, those are folks who are 32 hours a week, 30 now, I'm sorry. After ACA, it's 30 hours a week or more. They're eligible for the sick leave hours on a graduated scale based on years of service, and those family and personal leave days that they can take for whatever reason, whether it's caring for a child or appointments or other matters. And then if they have part-time employees, and those are 20 hours a week or more, they have sick leave and family and personal leave that they are eligible to use. If after that 7-day waiting period, their illness or disability is going to extend beyond that, then they would apply for VSDP benefits. And we use a third party to determine eligibility for that, who coordinates, gets the medical information about those employees and makes a determination regarding how long those folks would be out for, their short-term disability benefits. And so this scale is based on, years of service and how many work days they get paid at 100% of their income replacement, or 80%, or 60%. And this first chart relates to folks who were hired prior to 2009. And then in 2009, just to keep things really easy, where there was another change that was made, and that's on the next slide. And so this would be what a new employee would be eligible for. After 2009, they have to wait 1 year before they're eligible for short-term disability benefits for non-work related items. So if it's a work-related matter, they don't have that 1 year for the short-term disability. The other thing that changed in 2009 was the income replacement for those who are 5 years or less of employment, and it stays at 60% up until you get to that 5-year point. So it's probably clear as mud. It's a very confusing program, but I'm happy to stop here for a moment to take any questions.
So, Trish, when somebody takes sick leave, we reimburse, that's reimbursable. We still pay their check, their time.
Yes.
Do we also then hire, I guess in some critical positions, we have to hire people, but the vast majority of the time, we don't hire somebody to, in addition, all right, Mr. Chairman, follow-up question. Does GASB require us to account for, all of that, all of those hours across 104,000 employees? It strikes me that's a heck of a lot of financial commitment that we have extant out there.
There
Does GASB
is
require an accounting of that?
There is a leave liability calculation within the Commonwealth's CAFR. And all of the details therein, I probably can't speak to, I can follow up with it, but we do have to aggregate into the Commonwealth's CAFR a leave liability number. We do.
But that's generally on the amount that, people have on the books.
That they could then.
That they could use. It's not what they have already used, it's what they have pending. What is the potential liability out there
And
that hasn't been used?
And I think it's also related to what they would get at payout.
At payout. We'll get there on the annual leave, we'll show you how that works.
All right, and then, so, another follow-up. So Sarah or Trish, or both of you, so I wanna do very Albo-esque. What do generally, and I realize employees have different things, but what do generally they like about VSDP? And then correlate, what generally do they dislike about VSDP?
In general, what they like about VSDP is they get family and personal leave that's very flexible. They can use it for whatever they want. What some of them don't like is that they can't carry it over from year to year. And so the reason why there was a migration from the carryover when VSDP was put in place is because it's paired with this short and long-term disability benefit. And so you don't want to give them a whole bunch of sick leave that they can carry over from year to year. You'd be duplicating the benefit. The other thing that some folks don't like is some folks don't like to share information. So if you are, you want to apply for short-term disability benefits, you have to coordinate with your care provider, with your medical professional, share that information, and then a determination is made. So I would say those are probably the likes and the dislikes. I don't know, Sarah, if you have other items.
I think it's calmed down compared to, we used to have a lot more noise in the system. I think people are getting used to it. What about any issues y'all have? I'm not in the VSDP system.
So the one thing I've heard from people that they don't like about STD necessarily is because it doesn't cover if they have a sick family member. It covers for their own illness, but not for sick family members, so therefore they have to use their own leave to cover that.
So they'd either have to use family and personal or annual leave or a percentage of their sick leave bucket. I don't know, Wayne, you might have other, state police are a little bit different.
We're good, I just wanted sort of a very high level. And then my last question, Trish. So have y'all done some sort of a shocks analysis? You and I have talked a lot about shocks analyses and all your various different hats, if you will. Have y'all done a shocks analysis of, at the end of the year, there's a lot of sort of accrued leave. What percentage of your folks actually take that, and all of a sudden, is it the calendar year or is it our fiscal year that you their time ends up?
It is on the fiscal year,
So
but
this-
we reported for David, the Department of Accounts for the CAFR on a calendar year.
Mr.
I mean, on a fiscal year basis for that report.
Are y'all seeing that in the month of June, there's a lot of employees that take a lot of accrued leave because otherwise they lose it? Or that sort of shocks to the system? Or I'm always astounded, my brother has got 16 years of accrued leave and he's never been a day sick, even though he's sick, he just goes into work. Are there most of our employees like my brother?
And I don't,
It's only gonna be for the traditional sick plan, and those people were here before 1999.
So they're old school, they actually come to work.
Yeah.
No
And I know
disrespect to the
I've got-
millennials in the room here, just in case there's some there.
You talked about the leave being fiscal year, I mean, the leave year is January through January.
Yes, but we report to David.
You
on
report
his-
your liabilities at the end of the thing, but you actually lose your leave in January. If you have a like your annual leave, you have a max you can carry over, and that's a January.
I'm just curious whether we see the last
Being
2 weeks
behavior
in December,
patterns.
a lot of people that just.
Well, you have a lot of people in Christmas time.
Yeah.
Yes.
A lot of leave
Yes.
because
The
of
answer
that.
is yes.
Cause that's in Christmas, that's a calendar year. What they do on the what they do when they do, DOA does their liabilities at the end of the year. You report earned leave as a liability on your books, so.
Earned and unused.
Yeah, earned and unused leave is reported on your books, so therefore that's on a fiscal year basis, but the actual leave policies are on the calendar year
Got it.
basis.
Thank you.
It's January.
Dr. Crazy. So those were a lot of the questions I wanted to ask, especially regarding the accounting, but, so, with tenure, you're getting benefits as well, right? You're getting more under the new program. Are you finding that that's, something that folks like, and that's keeping people?
we tend to have, a pretty seasoned population with folks with a lot of service, so they're in those buckets, so folks do like to be rewarded for tenure, so I think they do, like it. Now, probably conversely, if you're a newbie and you have to wait the 1 year, you might not be particularly pleased about that. And we have had some folks, who've, complained a little bit about why that is. It is industry standard to have a 1 year, public-private kind of industry standard to have the 1 year waiting period, so you don't have someone who comes and on their first day submits a claim and you bought that claim, which
I'm thinking
did
more
happen
disability.
previously.
We've had cases like, really unusual but sad cases, where an employee has developed cancer once they came to the state. And they didn't have any ESPP leave, and so there was some great concern about that, about how to help that employee. So they're the exception, not the rule.
We do encourage the folks who are in the waiting period, to take a policy. Would be self-funded, but we encourage that, in the new employee orientation to cover them for that essentially gap year.
John, I do have one other question. Have y'all ever thought, I'm just innovating here, have you ever thought of pooled leave? For all those old school that, they're not gonna use their leave, and you've got some folks, they pool their leave and
It's
actually.
called leave sharing.
It's called what?
Leave sharing, it's on your cheat sheet.
Oh, yeah. I haven't gotten adjusted to the cheat yet. There's a lot of dots here, and I'm still questioning, Mr. Chairman. We actually have
Hold on to
specific
this,
leave for
Dr.
bone marrow and organ transplant, but not for, cancer surgery or for some other, okay.
So, Stephen, do you wanna kick off with annual? Places?
That's for you, don't you?
Yeah, right.
All right, as Michael teed up, annual leave, and that's a policy, 4.10. And that's accrued at the end of each pay period, and it is tiered based on years of service. The maximum amount that can be carried over, there's a cap, and newly hired people get 12 days, and if you're more senior, you can get up to 25 days. And part-time people are prorated. And if you look at the chart, this will show you, particularly at 25 years or more, there is a cap where 336 is the maximum you can carry over. And one of the things that we do look at is we look at flexible work schedules as something to attract and retain employees, telework, alternate work schedule. One other thing we do track is average leave earned, used, and lost. Because there are employees, the average leave lost, what last time I looked was 3 hours and something on average, that was lost. So it's not that they use everything that they had the ability to take. And just like everything else, every employee has their own work ethic. And those that work and come to work sick, those people are gonna be using it and they're not gonna be taking off. And you have people that will use every holiday, every minute they have. And you have a wide variety in the Commonwealth, and you will find all of those types in the Commonwealth. But I think this chart will give you an idea of the maximum carryover and how tenure does have an impact on this. And then we wanted the other leave types. We didn't list holidays here, but these are the other leaves. But I think your real ones were annual leave and VSDP and sick leave. But there are a whole host of others that I think you can get the insight on the dot sheet. So we're prepared to take any questions that you might have. And we hope this shows you more how it's related, how these programs are related. And there are really two programs running simultaneously, while the leave programs and everything else are very similar. But you can see on the dot chart that the VSDP does play a role into which policies apply to you.
Excellent. Excellent.
Real quick question. Say, so you've been here 33 years and you retire and you've got 3 months of leave accrued, or you've got the whole maximum 430. What happens? How's that treated?
You get paid out.
You do.
But if you have 432 hours that you earned but didn't use, you can only get paid out 336.
Gotcha.
So they're leaving something on the table, and people do leave things on the table.
Excellent. Thank you for putting this together and integrating it.
And then also there's a payout of $5,000 on sick leave that's not used, up to $5,000. For traditionals, that's what I said, for 25% with a cap at 5,000. Since we're talking caps, 5,000 is the most you can get. If you've got it available, you may have more, but you don't get to get paid more. So you're capped for $336 and 5,000 for sick leave on the traditional side, not on the VSDP side.
One quick question. Military leave for someone that's in the National Guard,
Yes.
Armed Reserve, Air Force Reserve, they go to summer camp for 2 weeks, okay? Does the state make up the difference?
When we are a 5-star recognized as a favored military employer for the Commonwealth, which is something we're proud of, and we do make up salary differences if you're deployed and you go over. Some of our state employees earn more in the military, so we wouldn't supplement, but others earn less, and we would pay the difference. We hold their job and pay the difference in the salary. So the employee is made whole regardless. We do match it with the orders.
Anything else on leave? Okay, let's move on with that. A little complicated, but still far more simplified than I thought we would make.
Is that, do you need
Yes,
any
ma'am, this is
additional
exactly
information?
what we wanted to know.
Oh, wait. Maybe it's, oh, here it is. There it is. Oh, here it goes. Third time's a charm.
Well, that applies to
Yeah, there it is. Okay, so last we met, we talked a little bit about an overview of VRS, and some of the folks on the committee had some various questions, and so we provided you with a letter component. The defined benefit component requires a 4% member contribution with an actuarially determined rate for the employer. And then the defined contribution component has a 1% employee mandatory contribution matched by an employer 1% contribution. Then they have the opportunity to do an additional 4% member contribution, voluntary, which would be matched by up to 2.5% by the employer. And in general, as we move through this, that makes us somewhat unique compared to other state hybrid plans, and we put some information in here for you to see. Although the graduated matching scales for contributions are much more common in the private sector. So we're kind of a little bit of a blend of both, I think. So one of the things that was asked was, how are folks doing on their voluntary contributions? And you may recall that we put in place as part of the hybrid plan in the original legislation that there would be an auto escalation component. So if you weren't making your voluntary contributions as of a date certain, which was January 1, 2017, and every 3 years thereafter, we would move you up by half a percent, unless you opted out. And so that's why you'll see on this chart that there was a big spike for people making those contributions. What I'm showing you on the bottom, on the dark bars, those are folks who took action without being auto-escalated. They said, hey, I want to increase my voluntary contributions, and they did so on their own. So about 21% of folks are making those actions without being auto-escalated, but the rest of those folks were auto-escalated. The reason why it goes down since auto-escalation is you get new hires in who weren't subject to the auto-escalation provision, depending on when they were hired. So if they were hired after 1/1/17 or right before that time, they wouldn't have been subject to the auto-escalation. So some of the things that we know is that because getting folks to save is hard. Yes?
Is that a one time?
It's every 3 years, so the next one will be 2020. We'll do it January 1, 2020, and we'll move everybody who's in the hybrid bucket who's not making the maximum, we'll move them up by 0.5%.
So we'll go back up.
Yep, so we'll have another spike again. So since we know that getting folks to save is a challenge, we're trying to take a multi-pronged approach to it. One of the things we know is that our employers are the first stop for a lot of our members, so we put together toolkits for them. We've done videos for them to try to help explain the plan. We've also done targeted mailings for folks. When auto escalation went out, we did a pretty extensive campaign, and industry standard is about 20% of folks would opt out of auto escalation. We had 3%. So that's a really good news story. Some of that might be driven by the fact that it's only a 0.5% increment, and so I'm not sure everybody noticed so much, but nonetheless, it's still a good news story that folks, once they got hooked in, they're beginning to save, and the power of compounding will start for them. The other thing we've added to folks for the hybrid plan is that they can, we call it Smart Step, they can select an amount that they want to increase their contributions on an annual basis, and they can put that in, and when they hit that date, it'll just automatically pop up for them. We've also put together a paycheck calculator so that they can, because these contributions come out pre-tax, if they put an amount in, they can look at what the impact would be on their bottom line take-home pay. And for a lot of folks, it's not obviously a dollar for dollar what they're saving, and so that's an incentive for them to move. And then lastly, we've done sort of an enhanced voluntary contribution messaging. So if they log into their account and then they're not doing 4%, it sort of says, it kind of gives a pop-up box. Did you know that you're basically leaving money on the table? Click here to increase your contributions. You're not ready to do that yet? Learn more, and then the next one is sort of, we'll give you more information. So we're trying to use some of that behavioral finance to kind of say, yes, I don't want to leave money on the table. Yes, I'll go and make those elections. So, not surprising that the hybrid plans tend to be our younger population. Most of the folks in the plan are under 40, and that's important when we we think about voluntary contributions because they're starting their families, they've got student debt, and those kinds of things. And then the other thing to think about is we've pulled out the folks who are making those active elections, not the folks who were auto-escalated, just the folks who said, I want to do this on my own, and it's very highly correlated to salary. The folks who are making more, 60% of those are actively engaging with voluntary contributions compared to a much smaller number for those who are earning lower salaries. And the other thing I thought would be helpful to know is that the folks who are making the full 4% on average are earning at least $53,000, and the average age of those folks is 40. But if they're not making anything, the average age of that cohort is 33 with a 37. So again, and it's not a surprise, but the data validates that income and age have an impact here. So, well, we've sort of been trying to, when we do outreach with employer roundtables and when we meet with individual members, we've kind of been keeping a list of, well, what's precluding you from doing it? And these are the general comments. Some say, well, I simply can't afford it. So in some of those cases, we point them to the paycheck calculator to try to help them say, well, maybe you can afford a little bit, and try to get them to understand that they're leaving money on the table. Some of the folks have said, well, they get so much information when they're first hired, they kind of didn't even realize that this was one of the benefits that they missed. So one of our challenges is to try to get in front of them again, not just at that first entry touch point. And then some of it is, they say other financial obligations make it difficult to save, which is sort of normal. But I think the two takeaway points here is trying to engage with employees often, not just at the initial touch point, and then also trying to get them to save something, because I think that makes a big difference. So some of our campaigns have sort of been around say what a latte could bring you over time, and those kinds of things. So small, I think one of them was small change, big difference, those kinds of messaging campaigns. Just to look back at our 457 plan, those are for folks who are not in the hybrid. Those are folks like me who are in plan 1 and plan 2. They can use that deferred compensation, plan, and we had auto enrollment in that plan. So if you were hired on or after 2008, you could go into the 457 unless you opted out. And so we had about, I think, 8.45% opted out over time of the auto enrollment for that group. So we've had good sticking power. The thing that's interesting about the 457 is the auto enrollment was at a very nominal amount. I think it was $20 per pay. And so you end up with a lot of folks with relatively small balances in that plan, but it's not the primary plan, it's a supplement. So that it's not as critical as in the hybrid where that's their primary retirement plan.
Oh, you're crazy.
Yes.
Is that also pre-tax?
Yes. And this is just a snapshot from back in time, and it just was one of the things that I thought was pretty powerful in the 457 plan was when the General Assembly implemented the cash match back in, I think it was 2000. You just saw this big bump up in participation, and it was only $20, and it was, let's see, 50% of your contribution up to $20 per pay. So $480 per year is what they would be eligible for, but folks were like, sure, I'm in. I want an extra $500 a year, So it did have really good power to engage people with the plan. So again, small changes can make big difference. When we look at other plans, there's about 11 states that offer a hybrid plan design. Most of them have similar, that they do a 1% multiplier on the DB side, but the DC side kind of varies pretty widely. And again, ours is different, as I mentioned earlier, in that the defined contribution component, we have a much smaller amount for the employee that goes in there. The employee contribution is 4 to the DB with 1 to the DC, and we look different than others. And so on this slide, I have to put my glasses orange is, what the employee is mandatorily required to put into the DC plan. And the, blue is what is required to put in their DB plan. These are states that have hybrids. And so, if there is no blue, it means that the employee isn't required to put anything into the DB portion of the plan. So as on a percentage basis, we're a little bit higher than the others on what we require folks to put into the DB plan. And that, of course, impacts their ability to make additional DC contributions. So, and this chart kind of takes the other side of it, where the green is the employer contribution to the DC plan. The orange is the employee's portion to the DC plan, and then the blue line that runs along it is the employee's portion of the DB plan. So I think we're the only plan that requires a minimum participation level, and we're the only plan that offers the additional matching contribution if the employee voluntarily contributes the funds. The others basically require a mandatory level in the DC plan with a flat contribution to supplement. So they're a little bit different than ours. And if we think about the ongoing cost of the benefits, if you don't think about any unfunded liabilities that you've accrued, just the ongoing cost of the benefit, and that's what the normal cost really is. When you were a Plan 1 person, you were roughly paying, the member was paying about 39% of the benefit. For a hybrid plan member, they're paying that's for teachers, about 44. For a state employee, that would be more like 45, and now they're paying a little bit over 50%. So it's just a different mix of what portion the member is paying. So I think kind of in summary, I think the good news things are that auto escalation and auto enrollment, they work. And so if we think longer term down the road on these kinds of plans, you can pair something like our auto escalation in the hybrid with an auto enrollment in the voluntary side. I think that it's clear that the voluntary contributions are tied to the income level and age, and so therefore we really think that education and communications are really critical to trying to improve those outcomes. And we're trying to work really closely with our employers to do that, and also including a financial wellness piece. And we've partnered with Sarah to put that even on the DHRM website to try to help people with understanding their overall financial wellness. And then we're somewhat unique compared to some of the other states, and some of that was intentional, and some of it is just plan design changes. But I think for future changes, as we've discussed a lot in this committee, it's sort of balancing the resources that we have with the outcomes that you want to achieve, and not just in the retirement space, but in terms of as we think about it in terms of that overall compensation package. So that's sort of my prepared kind of follow-up. I hope that was helpful, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
So they're maxed at, you can't get more than 4% voluntarily.
Correct.
Even if you're over 55 or.
But they can use the 457. Once they have maxed in the hybrid plan, they can use the 457, and those maximums in terms of the IRS limits are coordinated. So they can't exceed the overall IRS limit for a 457, but they can take advantage of standard catch-up and age 50 catch-up and those kinds of things on the other side as well.
Maybe go a little deeper on the escalator.
Mm-hmm.
I think you said it's half of what you said.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And where does it end? Do we need some more work on that?
Well, I think it's, one of the things that we've had legislation on previously was thinking about, there's a couple ways to do auto escalation. One is to do it more frequently. The way it is now, it's every 3 years. So it would take 24 years for an employee to actually get to the time they're probably knocking on the exit. So, so maybe, you know, you could shorten that and you could do it every year, or you could do it every other year, or you could also increase it from 0.5% to a bit more. You don't necessarily wanna go full board because you don't want people to completely disengage or opt out. So you kinda have to find that sweet spot with what's enough to kinda get them to make a difference, but also, what's not too much that they say, oh, I can't do it, I'm out. And so I think the bill, the last time was 0.5% every other year. So it was every other year with 0.5%. But you could do a variety of different things, and of course, however you do it, we can model the cost on that. It was not that, I mean, relative to lots of things, retirement, all numbers are big, but that one wasn't as big a lift as some other kinds of changes.
Don't you think it would be easier to implement increase the frequency on the 0.5% rather than increasing the amount, keeping the amount smaller because of our inconsistent raises? And we've always encouraged people when there is a raise to, give yourself money first. And now, not everyone does that, but we try to encourage that.
And that's been consistent messaging that Sarah and her team have done forever, and we've shared the same
Right.
things with our other public employees and school divisions, so it's probably a smaller amount more frequently is probably more palatable to most,
I think that will be more successful. Now, one of the things you talked about, the financial counseling, we offer EAP, Employee Assistance Program, and one of the top 3 issues usually is financial counseling, where they go out and can get it. So that's another service that's offered through that contract, and it's being used.
Very good. Let's call Betsy. Call. Okay, work. Thank you
Thank
so
you.
very much.
Sure.
It's been very informative. Everyone should keep your cheat sheets and your papers.
Yeah.
Next year.
Great information, thank you, you're welcome.